Okay, welcome to the second video of chapter 3, and it's going to be about, and let's go ahead and take a look. It's going to be just about the fourth learning objective. It's taking all what we've learned before about job costing and applying it to business decisions. So let's take a look at the three questions that this learning objective covers. Questions 6, 7, and 8 on your homework. And the first question is more of a kind of a review of the previous term. So job costing versus process costing. Just make sure you understand job costing can track to individual items. Process costing is for things that are hard to divide or not worth dividing, such as paper clips or wine or oil or other sort of liquids. Well, we have two different types of material or two different types of items. It's typically direct, whether it's materials or labor, or indirect things. Just realize tracing, we use the word tracing, cost tracing, when we're talking about things that are direct. In other words, we can directly trace this material or this labor to an object, to a particular product. Whereas allocation, well, that's what we did with the manufacturing overhead. We can't trace it directly, so what we do is we come up with a method to allocate, and that's why the two different words. It's all just cost assignment, whether it's indirectly through allocation or directly through tracing. A cost driver is anything that you're trying to figure out the cost for. And a lot of times, especially when we're allocating cost, we pick something that we're going to use as the thing that we believe is most associated with the increase in costs. And for this chapter and a lot of our questions, it's going to be machine hours or direct labor hours. But it could be anything. I used the example of square feet in a previous the previous video example. These last two items here, well, this is kind of getting into the real world. Now, it used to be that we would teach with paper slips on materials requisitions and job records, and in fact, we'll kind of look at things from a sort of a paper point of view. But more and more, all of these things are going online. But just realize that when things get more complex, there's not just one piece of material or one labor, that they could happen at different times or come into the process at different times, that there is a tracking system. So this is kind of referring to that. We're going to do a job costing, and we're going to have a bit of a work through the system. Okay, so let's take a look at question 7, or an example similar to question 7. So there's going to be some text, or there's going to be a chart or a table of various things, but I have pulled out the kind of the basics. This isn't exactly how it looks, but this is me kind of bullet pointing. Now, it used to be when we had to do process costing and job costing, you had to first identify, well, which thing is it doing? Well, we're just doing job costing, so just realize it's job costing. Second is, well, what is the allocation based upon? It could be machine hours, it could be square feet. This one is based upon direct labor hours. You want to just know that up front. Then, in order to be able to calculate your rate, you need to know two estimates. And here are our two estimates. Estimate number 1, which is the total overhead, and estimate number 2 is, well, remember, we're doing it by direct labor hours, so what is our total direct labor hours? We need these two numbers to figure out our predetermined manufacturing overhead rate. And this number will come in later, and we'll work at it. We'll remind ourselves of it. So a question like this may give us a couple of jobs and give us some information. So just like I've said before, we need to calculate MOH because that's the unknown. Typically, these two things are known. The direct materials and the direct labor hours, those two things typically are known and tracked. It's the calculation of the MOH. So what is our first step? If you remember, if you remember in our last video, that we start off with what is our total estimated costs, and here it is $66,750. And what is our total estimated labor hours? So this is what we say, okay, I think this is what it is beforehand, before I even know, so I can come up with this. And so this ends up, when you do the calculation, ends up being $15 per hour. We don't know if that's going to be, but based upon history and upon our previous, experience with this kind of work, we're making our best guess. And it'll either be high or be low, and we'll figure out what to do with that when the time comes. Now we take this and we'll pull it down and we'll remind ourselves, okay, I'm going to pull down this same graph, the same chart, and we've already figured out the $15. The next requirement is calculate the overhead to be allocated. So remember, step 1 is use the two estimates to figure out the rate. Step 2 is using that rate, apply it to actuals, right? Apply it to actuals to figure out what the costs are. So here we have actual labor hours used. So for job 1, if I wanted to figure out what is my best guess at what the overhead is going to be, I would say 180 times 15, and for job 101, and 80 hours times 15. So this isn't how much we're paying the labor. What we're saying is, in addition to paying the labor, I'm going to pay an additional $15 for every hour in indirect and other costs. So these two numbers come out to be $2,700 and $1,200. So those are our overhead costs. Okay, so we have direct materials, we have labor hours. That's not a dollar amount, but we do have overhead costs. So going down here, we would say, well, what is our total job cost? And just remember, this is direct materials plus direct labor plus manufacturing overhead. That's what our total cost is. Well, in direct materials, that's pretty simple. That's given to us up here. So we're just going to pull those down directly. Those are given. And we just figured out the manufacturing overhead. We just figured that out right here. So we've got those two numbers. Now we need to figure out direct labor, not the number of hours. We got to figure out what's the dollar amount. Well, this is where this 32 comes in. Well, we have the number of hours. We have 180 for job 101. So job 101 would be 180 hours, and we're paying them $32 an hour. That's pretty good. And for job 102, it's 80 times this 32. And we get those two numbers and we add them up, and it will be, well, let's see, it'll be 5760 and 2560. And when we add up those numbers, our total costs for each job are going to be 26,460 and 16,760. Okay, and that is how you'll get something very similar for question number 7. Okay, so question number 8, and again, I'm going to do something very similar, is going to take exactly what we did before but ramp up a little bit more in complexity. So we're going to do all the same sort of things. So here, once again, I have gone and read the question, and it may have be a wall of text, but I'm going to pull out a couple of the primary things. Uses job costing. Okay, we have an order of 100 tires at $50 an each. At 50 each, we might use that a little later on. What is the allocation? Well, it's labor hours. And here are our two estimates that we need to figure out our rate. Plus, rather than just a couple of simple items of labor, direct labor, like in the previous question, we were given just total hours. We've got to actually do some adding up here. Some bits of information have been given us, a little bit different. So let's do the first step like we normally do. Okay, let's take our estimates, because we need to figure out our rate, 460. And we're going to take our total estimate of the labor hours, 23, and that's going to give us an overhead rate of 20. So this is our best guess that for every hour of labor that we use, we're going to incur another $20 in manufacturing overhead. Okay, so we'll pull this same information down, and we've got a little bit of a complicated table, and I've tried to simplify it here. Now just be aware this is pulled from here, right? We just calculated this. This is our predetermined overhead rate, and I've just plugged it in here saying that this is our rate. Now all these other numbers from these tables, I've done a little bit of pre-entering it. So you may have a whole bunch of requisition numbers. So these will be material requisition numbers. These would be labor record numbers like time cards or that sort of thing. So we're going to kind of do it according to date, and we would be able to kind of keep track of things on a calendar basis. So here we're seeing, okay, 430, not 437, order number 437 is $840. Order number 439 is $640. And then order 501 was $1,000. We would add those up and we would get $2,480. That's going to be our direct materials cost. So in other words, we're just trying to figure out our job order cost again. Direct labor, well, we've got two instances of this. We've got on April 30th, we've got $240 worth of labor, and here we've got $540. So notice that they gave it to us without us having to actually figure it out. Now, we know that we allocate manufacturing overhead based upon direct labor hours. So what is our total? We figured out the rate on the previous slide. So what is the total number of direct labor hours? Well, it's these two numbers right here, isn't it? So isn't it 42 hours? And remember, this is for every hour of direct labor, we believe that there's an additional $20 of manufacturing overhead. That's our best guess. So we would multiply that out, and that would be 840. And this column ended up being 780. So here we've got direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. And if we wanted to do the overall cost summary, we'd just pull those numbers down. 2480, 780, and 840. We would add those up, and our total job cost, even though that it was a bunch of different numbers in a bunch of different places, we still come up with the same process. Figure out our rate, apply the rate, add up the materials and the labor, and then figure out the manufacturing overhead. So 4,100. The last part of this question is, and once again here I'm going to pull down the answer that we got in the previous part. Now we need to figure out profit and per unit profit. So what is the sales? And remember I said we're going to use this a little later. Well, we sold 100 tires at $50 a piece. So that's just 100 times $50 a piece. Well, that's going to be $5,000 for this particular job. It's going to be sales of $5,000. Now the cost of the job, we just went through all that effort to figure out what's the cost. The cost of the job was $4,100. So you can see how this is going to be used in a lot of different environments. Don't you really want to know how much did I sell it for? How much did it cost me? Well, here's our profit. And how many tires did we, so this would be the total dollar profit, and we sold 100 tires. So if I say, well, what was my per tire profit? Well, just 900 divided by 100, and that's going to be $9. We made $9 per tire on this particular job. And different jobs may have more or less, but at least we'd be able to then start to see which ones did better and which ones did worse. Okay. That should be able to get you through Learning Objective 3.4, questions 6, 7, and 8. If you have any questions, please email me or come visit me on the Monday, Wednesday Zoom office hours. Thank you, and see you in video number 3.